people how to wear those masks.
outside Remco. ואנחנו מקווים שבמשך הזמן הקרוב ביותר. זאת הייתה הודעת דובר צה"ל. That was the IDF spokesman.
That's what it is. They're instructing people how to wear those gas masks.
They are in the studio. They are very clear in the studio. They're safe in the studio. פאניקה הייתה התקפת טילים על מרכז הארץ. אנחנו נדווח לכם ככל שתגיע אלינו האינפורמציה המדויקת, ובינתיים נשמיע שירים. At
the meantime, songs. At the meantime, they're going to have songs for us.
They're going to play songs.
Yeah.
They're going to play songs on Israel television. They gave an instruction on how to wear your gas mask. They told everybody not to panic. Now they're going to play songs for the civilian population, military population. They're playing piano music. Try and calm the nerves.
Sit here in the room. It's a closed room. And then we hear my husband and two daughters. Okay?
Your husband and two daughters are in your room in Hulan in a closed room. By closed room, are the doors and windows taped?
Yes, it's closed with masking tape.
How old are your children?
14, girls 14. And the other is 15 and a half.
How much fear is there in the room with you?
What?
How afraid are you?
Again, please?
How afraid are you tonight in that room?
I don't understand.
What do you mean?
Please repeat.
What's on what?
Hello?
Ms. Prisoner, we have to leave right now to go to Richard Roth. We have some important details that he has for us. Richard Roth, come in, please.
Yeah, hello. Israeli radio.
Richard Roth is about to tell us what he's been gleaning from Israeli radio. As
is a very vivid depiction of the fog of war. Facts are incomplete. People don't respond necessarily the way they should. They make assumptions. It's extremely important to follow your training and react to the situation the way that you're trained. Now, the facts are that at least 2, perhaps more, missiles have landed in Israel, and at least one media source is saying that at least some of those missiles had nerve gas. That's sufficient to take all proper precautions. It's sufficient evidence to take all proper precautions as well as the instructions of the Israeli government. Now, these chemical agents work in ways that are probably not very familiar to people. This isn't medicine. These nerve agents work very, very quickly, within seconds. They spread fairly rapidly, and even if your room is sealed with tape, it's possible that some portions of it can seep in. That's why it's extremely important that people stay masked.
we have this in from, I believe, the Pentagon on the missiles. There were 8, according to the Pentagon and intelligence sources. 3 landed in unpopulated areas. 1 landed in Haifa. 2 landed in Tel Aviv, and 1 is location where it landed is unknown. So we have confirmations of 2 cities being hit by missiles, Haifa with 1, Tel Aviv with 2, and 3 of those missiles landing in unpopulated areas.
David, this is a very small attack in terms of numbers of missiles. Certainly the danger is very great, but it's a very small attack in terms of the quantity of ordnance that is landing in Israel.
This is going to be difficult for you to explain, but if there... We're going now to the Israeli Defense Force, and I believe Ari Cohen, who has a statement.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Please go ahead with the statement from the Israeli Defense Force.
We're just releasing this statement. All the citizens of Israel are allowed to take their masks off, but are asked to remain in the sealed rooms. if there will be another sound of alarm, everybody must wear the masks again. This is the announcement.
Would you repeat it for me slowly, Mr. Cohen?
Okay.
Go ahead,
The citizens of Israel are allowed to take their masks off and are asked to remain in the sealed rooms. If there will be another alarm, everybody must wear the mask again.
Thank you very much.
By this at all?
No, I'm not surprised, but terribly saddened by it, obviously. But Saddam Hussein is one of the leaders of the last decade who signaled us every time publicly exactly what he was going to do. And when he does it, we tend to be surprised because it's all so outrageous.
Okay, Judith Kipper, please stand by. You do put your finger on one of the things we just hadn't thought of at the moment, which, of course, is the incredible migration of Soviet Jews to Israel, who, as Judith points out, arrive in the last week and come to encounter war in a region. So many of them arriving in Israel over the last year, feeling they had escaped a kind of repression with which they couldn't live any longer, had gone to Israel. Many of them not
to anybody even 10 or 20 feet away from where it is. So once they know where it is, the threat to the public at large could be contained by just routine civil defense measures.
And Seth Karras, if you are exposed to nerve gas and you're rushed to a hospital, what can they do for you in an emergency treatment? Because we understand that they do know what they're doing in Israel when it comes to a chemical warfare attack.
Well, I'd rather defer to somebody who's more of a medical expert than myself. There are treatment methods, but I'm not sure I could give an accurate description of them.
Yeah. We're going to put up Bob Bazell here in our studios in New York and Martin Fletcher in Israel at the same time. And Martin, first of all, if you'll tell us what you're hearing there right now.
Well, we've just heard, Tom, that the radio has announced that Israeli citizens can take their gas masks off, that the scare from that the effect of the nerve gas attack has ended, which suggests to me that there were not many chemical warheads involved in that attack.
There would be no doubt in your mind, however, that the Israelis tonight must be preparing some kind of a retaliation. The question is, what is the scope of it?
Israel is so concerned with not upsetting the American coalition against Iraq. They've been told so sternly by the United States not to retaliate that there will certainly be, all I can say is they'll certainly be bearing that in mind. But I've just had one conversation with a political source while I was off the air just now, Tom, who said he believes that Israel will retaliate.
Yeah. We have Robert Bazell sitting here in the studio with us, your friend and colleague, and we're going to keep you on the line there, Martin Fletcher, while I ask him about treatment. If you go to a hospital, what can they do once you have been exposed?
Well, with nerve gas, Tom, there are specific antidotes that stop the action of the gas on the body. One of the things that's significant...
And B-52 striking from yet another base are said to be carpet bombing targets of the elite Praetorian, in effect, Iraqi Guard, Saddam Hussein's best troops. These, of course, not B-52s. The B-52s are the old stratofortresses, the high-flying, high-altitude bombers, not very precise, but they can deliver a lot of tonnage, and they have been doing so all day. But the war so far has been in the air. This may soon move to a ground war. Allied troops, led by U.S. troops, are massing near the Kuwaiti border. A big move to the west, kind of flanking movement deep in the desert to the west is also reported. U.S. and other Allied troops are poised for a possible invasion of Kuwait. This would involve U.S. Marines and U.S. Army troops. No indication yet when that next phase on the ground might take place. David Martin's at the Pentagon with late information on the Scud missile attacks on Israel. David?
Dan, U.S. sources say it does appear as if Israel is retaliating now against Iraq for these Scud missile attacks. Just earlier, we had Jim Jensen from Jerusalem saying that that was being reported on by the government-run Israeli radio. This is independent confirmation from U.S. sources. I should say corroboration. It's not a certain thing, obviously, until the weapons land in Iraq, but there is corroboration from U.S. sources that that report on Israeli radio is correct and that Israel is now in the process of retaliating for this attack, bringing them, obviously, into this war, changing the equation. The question of whether or not Scud missiles have been launched against Saudi Arabia is still, I think, an open question. U.S. officials expect such an attack based on the fact that that Hussein has demonstrated the capability to do it against Israel, and he is bound to want to score as many hits as he can while he is still able to cause some damage. Now, these Scud missiles were launched from mobile launchers, as Senator Sam Nunn pointed out earlier. And earlier today, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin Powell, talked about his concerns about being able to locate all of those Scud missiles.
David Martin of the Pentagon.
They are high.
Our CBS News coverage of the Scud missile attacks on Israel and Israel's reported retaliation continues.
A wide shot, Andre, can you give a wide shot, please, of our bureau?
And here we're going to talk with James Blackwell a bit more in our studio, and with Steve Emerson of our Special Assignment Unit. Steve, you haven't been on with us in this segment, so why don't we start with you, and we're also here with James Blackwell. Steve?
Okay. The Israeli government came under attack about an hour and a half ago, basically throughout the entire coastal line of Israel. Jerusalem was not hit, however. The Israeli military intelligence officials who I spoke to said that they had been expecting some type of attack because they had been told by the United States they did not believe that all the mobile Scud missiles had been hit by the raids in the last 24 hours. Now, in the last several minutes, we know that the Israeli government has told its citizens that it can remove its gas masks. However, the Israeli government has not told its citizens the extent of casualties and or number of hits.
James Blackwell, your thoughts?
Well, this is the first time a major Western democracy has been hit with a gas attack. If last night's air attack by the United States was historic, this too was a historic moment. And while, as I said earlier, the number of missiles is really indicative of a very small attack, an act of desperation on the part of Saddam Hussein, certainly the danger is very real, and it's something that we'll have to take note of. Something which threatens to widen this war unless the response is measured and appropriate.
Charles Jaco is in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. We're going to him directly now as we leave those pictures of our Jerusalem Bureau for just a moment. Charles. Charles
Good evening,
Jaco.
or good morning. Hello, good morning. Do you hear me?
Yes, Charles.
It's 4:25 here in the morning in Saudi Arabia. We just came up from the shelter downstairs, where we were told first by U.S. military people that the bases surrounding us here in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, had detected some sort of launch, and this was a warning from the bases that we should get inside, clear these camera platforms, and get down to the shelter. Once we were in the shelter, we were told that there apparently had been a missile launch. We asked Saudi officials, quote, "Are there birds in the air?" They nodded at us, yes. We were led to understand that Saudi radar, pardon me, Saudi radar did detect several, and we don't know what several means, Scud missile launches in the direction of Saudi Arabia. Now, we were told when we came back up here to keep our gas masks and respirators with us that the chance of some sort of attack was still fairly high. The chance of a chemical attack was questionable, but that we should keep respirators with us and be prepared to re-evacuate to the shelter at any moment. So we are now here on the camera platform waiting to see what happens next. The lights are still on in this city all around us on both sides. There's no evidence of this area, an oil-producing area, an area with military bases, being blacked out at all. But again, we were told by Saudi officials that they did detect some sort of launches in the direction of Saudi Arabia. They were as surprised as everyone else by the apparent, and I must stress apparent, attack on Israel, because they said right before this raid started, we were asking them, and they said as far as they knew, although they had not been in complete communication with them, their radars had not spotted any Scud launches in the direction of Israel. So that's the latest from here. We're waiting to see what happens next in eastern Saudi Arabia, and time will tell about that.
Charles, every time we see you, and thanks again for that fine report, every time we see you by your magnificent non-potted palm, you're alone. Are you alone?
No, I am not. I'm here with camera crews, Faray Dollar, my cameraman, Jim Miller, my producer, correspondent Rick Salinger, who looks like he just got out of bed, is standing here next to me. There is a, Jim, how many staff people do we have here?
About 35.
We have about 35 CNN staff people total in Saudi Arabia. I'm definitely not alone.
Okay,
everyone is concerned about this.
Charles, we need to go to Jerusalem now right away. We're going to switch, and we'll be back to you when we can.
Can we?
Sure. And we're back in the bureau, the CNN bureau.
And we can just feed it straight through. Right. You guys want to come over and talk to...
Right, that's Larry Register, our bureau chief in Jerusalem, with Linda Scherzer,
Headley.
correspondent.
Michael McMillan, how are you? How are you doing? Good, nice to see you.
Hi.
From BBC?
Yes.
Okay, Michael, we're on live right now, if you can talk to us. Headley, you can come over, Headley, if you like. Michael, can you tell us what you've seen out there this morning in the streets of Jerusalem, where you're coming from?
Well, Jerusalem's pretty quiet at the moment. Obviously, there's no traffic on the road whatsoever. I'd remind you about, 45 minutes ago, or I suppose it's about an hour ago now, we had the air raid siren. We were in the Hilton Hotel. We got out of there very quickly. Most people have been taken downstairs into the basement. And basically, I suppose there's been a degree of confusion and panic throughout Jerusalem. I've certainly heard that
Larry
something
Register?
up to 8 Scud missiles.
Larry Register, can you hear me interrupting you? Larry,
and,
this is David French in Washington. Larry, I'm sorry to interrupt you this way, but we have urgent news just in. And we have word from Charles Jaco in Dhahran that there had been explosions incoming, and then we lost our signal. Charles Jaco reporting from Dhahran that there was something incoming, meaning ordnance, and that there were explosions, and then we lost our signal. It doesn't mean anything necessarily bad has happened to those people we just saw. We're going to Dhahran now, and they're...
All three of you?
We can maintain audio and show video.
Okay, we have to...
No, all we do is hit the switch and we can
Okay, this is CNN.
Charles Jaco in Saudi Arabia here. There was just the sound of an explosion in the direction of the air base. We've been advised that this area is under threat of imminent attack any second. We should be prepared to go to the base or go to the shelters immediately. We're all preparing to get out. We hear sounds of something overhead, and there was a large explosion in the direction of the air base near here. As you can imagine, we're telling our people to get ready to get out of here and get to shelter as soon as they can.
Charles, fold it and go. Charles Jaco, fold it up and go, and God bless you, and thank you for that report.
We're thinking about it right now. I think
now,
we should get it. Okay, guys, break it down. Out of here.
Wolf Blitzer at the Pentagon, please.
Yes, David, only moments ago, Pentagon sources told CNN that the 8 Scud missiles, the ballistic missiles that landed in Israel, appear not to have had chemical or nerve warheads, that they did have conventional warheads. The first reports reaching the Pentagon say that the missiles that landed in Israel had conventional warheads, that Israel radio and television went on the air and told people to put on gas masks strictly as a precaution, a prudent precaution, obviously, given the fact that the Iraqis do have chemical capabilities. But the indications that the Pentagon has received are that the missiles, the 8 missiles that landed in Israel, had conventional warheads. We now see that planes are clearly taking off from air base in Saudi Arabia. It's obviously the middle of the night right now, and there have been these reports that Scuds are moving towards eastern Saudi Arabia as well. We've lost our feed from Saudi Arabia, but here at the Pentagon, we can confirm that the number is 8. 8 ballistic missiles from mobile launchers from Iraq landed in Israel, 2 in the southern Tel Aviv area, 2 in Haifa, 3 in rural, unpopulated areas of Israel. 1 landed in an area unknown, but it was tracked coming in. The Israelis are expected to retaliate massively. The Israelis had warned the United States that they would accept the first strike, but if it happened, the Israelis would retaliate. And we don't know if that retaliation has started yet, but we have learned that the Israelis are certainly going to retaliate. We therefore can confirm now that the initial reports reaching the Pentagon are that the 8 Scud missiles that landed in Israel had conventional warheads, did not have nerve or gas or chemical warheads. David?
If they know all that much. We're going now to Richard Roth in Tel Aviv by telephone. Richard, come in.
Yeah, very quickly here. We were just ordered to put our gas mask back on. We've heard explosions, within the hour. I have a spokesman here for the Israeli Defense Force who is here in the sealed floor here of the hotel we're in, and he can give us the update for you and for me. Here we go. Hello.
Please go ahead, sir. Tell us your name and your title and your message.
Well, the name is Colonel Renan Gissin. I'm the deputy spokesman. As of now, we don't yet have any full confirmed report on the number of hits inside Israel. It may be ranging between 8 to 10 missiles. Apparently, some fell in the vicinity of Haifa, and others in other places in the vicinity and the area of the Dan block that includes Tel Aviv and others further down south.
Colonel Giesen,
for obvious reasons, I cannot give you the specific places where they fell. The population of Israel is now in their sealed rooms, and there has been issued an order to go and wear back the gas masks. And right now, at least in the place where I'm located, in the Hilton Hotel, everything is under control. There's no panic. People are wearing their gas masks. They already got into the habit of taking them off and putting them back again. And the morale is quite high, and there's no panic. And everyone here follows the regulations and whatever is required to be done. And I hope that very soon we'll be able to get out of this sealed floor and get back to our rooms.
Colonel Giesen, this is David French in Washington, and you're still hearing me well? The Pentagon has, we just had a report from the Pentagon here in the United States that the Scud missiles, 8 of them at least, had conventional warheads, and we have no intelligence or reports that any of them contained any toxic materials. Can you amplify or add anything to that? Deny?
At this stage, I cannot confirm or deny the report because I clearly do not yet have the full information about the contents or the nature of the warheads of those missiles that hit Israel. Nevertheless, we pointed out in the past, and I reiterate it now, that we take all the necessary precautions regardless of what warhead the missile would carry, and sometimes it is not possible to determine what warhead the missile carries before impact. And therefore, we took the necessary precautions and ordered the population to put on their gas masks, to enter the sealed room, and therefore to minimize as much as possible any damage or casualties.
Colonel Giesen, thank you very much for that report. I'd like to ask you to give the microphone back now to Richard Roth. Larry Register in Jerusalem has a question for Richard Roth there with you, as we thank you from the IDF for that report. We know you're well prepared. The world is wishing you well tonight. Larry Register, your question for Richard Roth.
Yes,
okay, thank you.
First, David, I just wanted to tell you what the IDF spokesman's office has told us. Colonel Mushifogel wanted me to pass on through him that the civilian population is well protected in their sealed room, and the situation is under control.
But you understand that when they put it within...
Yes, on our staff, everyone is okay. There is a woman in the on the floor here receiving oxygen, I believe, but CNN crew and other journalists that are here with me seem to be okay. We were ordered to put our gas masks on, and then after an hour, there was an all clear, but now we were told to put them back on. Haven't been able to hear any explosions in the last few minutes, but those earlier booms were quite terrifying as the city was shaken after 2 a.m. our time.
Okay, Richard, I just wanted to verify with you that everyone is okay with our staff. Everyone here in Jerusalem is okay. They've told us it's okay to take our mask off here in Jerusalem.
Telling us that...
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. A little bit of communication there within Israel. We're going now to Jim Miller, our producer in Saudi Arabia. Come in, Jim.
Yes, hello.
Jim, are you under attack there?
I'm sorry?
Are you, will you describe what's going on there, please?
Right now, the national air raid signals are sounding here. Civil defense signals are sounding throughout this area near the air base here in Dahran. We had a alert a moment ago where we were told to report to the air raid shelter here in our hotel, which we did. We were given the all clear. However, the hotel security staff had told us that there was still a threat of a possible chemical attack. And we came back up, then we were told to go back. I am the only one here on the CNN platform at the moment before I leave and go down to the air raid shelter.
Jim, describe who's there with you and as much as you can about how everyone is.
Everyone is fine from the CNN staff at the moment. We're all together, and this is, needless to say, quite a harrowing experience when these sirens go off.
But there have been no...
The lights of the city are still in view. They have not blackened them out. Earlier tonight, we had been told that there had been a possible report, or there was a report of a possible Scud missile launched towards Saudi Arabia that was not confirmed. However, the military said they were keeping their eyes out for such an alert.
Jim, from where you are talking to us, how long does it take you to get to an air raid shelter?
About 15 seconds.
15 seconds. I believe your brother. Continue a bit more. All right, Jim, thank you for that report. We're going back to Richard Roth right now. Richard, you're on again.
Yes, I was just checking with our staff members here if everybody was okay. It's very hard to hear people talk inside these gas masks, and you're not sure who you're talking to sometimes. Still very difficult to hear what's going on outside. These rooms are sealed up. We're unable to see outside.
Well, we were talking here in the studio about the scale of this attack, at least from what we can tell. It is a few missiles. I'd like to put James Blackwell on with you just briefly. He has a comment to make.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if there was any more we could hear about the attacks in Dhahran. It seems to me that if we have one explosion in Dhahran, 8 missiles landing on Israel, that this is a desperation attempt by Saddam Hussein to terrorize the citizens, the people in the rear bases, with what is likely to be the last of the missiles that he has remaining after last night's attack, and in the process trying to capture headlines. I'm not sure if that's an accurate interpretation. It's far too early to make that kind of assessment, but if it were something more than that, we'd see a lot more missiles landing than we have so far.
Richard, you have an immediate reaction to any of that?
Well, I don't know if it's a final act of desperation. No one knows how many launchers or mobile missiles he's got ready, and certainly everyone here is not ready to say it's a final act of desperation. This city was breathing a big sigh of relief earlier yesterday, even though the streets were empty. And I don't know what to tell you, except that Israel, no doubt, is going to retaliate, and they have promised to do it swiftly and very completely. The Israeli Air Force has been on 24-hour alert. Pilots have been in their cockpits all the time.
All right, Richard, thank you very much for that report. Stay near those shelters and obey everyone there. We're going now once again to the Pentagon for the latest developments in Wolf Blitzer.
David, let me just recap what has taken place here at the Pentagon this evening. Pete Williams, the Pentagon spokesman, came back into this room a few minutes ago. First, the Pentagon has put out a formal statement, and let me read that to you. The Pentagon says, "We can confirm that Iraq launched Scud missiles that impacted in Israel. We do not have any numbers nor missile warhead type. We have been concerned about this all along. That is why Scuds are high-priority targets." After that statement was released, Pentagon spokesman Pete Williams added that he did not have any idea exactly how many missiles did land in Israel. He also did not know whether they had a conventional warhead or some sort of chemical or gas warhead. He suggested that it was still premature to make any final conclusions. We have been told earlier that the initial indications are that the 8 missiles that landed in Israel did have conventional warheads based on initial reports reaching here. David?
We have a report just in to us. Wolf, thank you for that. We'll be back. We have a report just in from the Israeli Defense Ministry that up to and possibly more than a dozen missiles have been launched from those mobile platforms to Israel. Let's go back to Jerusalem now, and Linda Scherzer there. Linda, what's the latest at your bureau?
Well, I want to point out, first of all, that Israeli television, within the past hour, started running the ad that they've been showing for the past week or so, explaining to people how to put on their gas masks, trying to calm the population, of course, to let them know that they're prepared and know what to do, because the Army and Civil Defense have been advising people what to do ever since there was this threat of a chemical attack. I'd like to pick up on something that my
power plant on the central California coast reports no protests or threats. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories, known for its nuclear weapons research, has had no threats. The Concord Naval Weapons Station, where a protester lost his legs in a protest 3 years ago, has been quiet, except for a small demonstration in support of Allied forces. Even California highway road crews are on 24-hour watch for suspicious or stalled cars, even unusual roadside debris. On subway systems, uniformed and undercover officers are riding all trains, and all lockers are bolted shut. Some U.S. airlines have dropped penalties for overseas passengers who may want to change their plans. Even some so-called non-refundable tickets can be changed to a time when perhaps the skies might be more friendly. Greg LaFave, CNN, San Francisco.
And CNN Headline News continues.
Just put that up and let it play for a moment. That's the reality in Israel tonight. One doesn't want to overstate it, but it's no good kidding ourselves and no good understating it. The dimensions of the war have changed over the last hour. Saddam Hussein making good on his threat to hurl the Scuds at Israel, hitting with at least 6, possibly as many as 8. Tom Fenton believes, but does not know that at least some of those Scuds did have chemical weapons. He believes that partly because of what the instructions have been from the Israeli government. We're going to pause for a moment to continue with our headlines after those sobering pictures from Israel where mothers having to strap on gas masks to their children and put special paraphernalia around the cribs of children. One could say rather directly that it puts in perspective the Israelis' response, which is to immediately say, we are going to retaliate against Iraq. Explosions heard in Saudi Arabia, what they were and why they were unclear at the moment. Air raid sirens sounding around the Dhahran military base. We're trying to sort that out and find out what the facts are. Allied bombings continue inside Iraq and in Kuwait, on Iraqi forces in Kuwait, including beefs, quote, in, quote, imminent danger. These pictures live as the U.S. and Allied warplanes continue taking off. I want to correct myself. I'm told now this is videotape. These aircraft thundering into the night as they thundered away in the day. Now these are pictures on videotape of people heading for the air raid shelters as the Dhahran area was told it was, quote, in imminent danger. There were unconfirmed reports. Only one source, Saudi officials, said that some Scud missiles had been fired in the direction of Dhahran. Now, that was the last we heard, and I emphasize that that report was never confirmed. Bob Simon has also heard explosions in and around Dhahran. We saw earlier some pictures of some mysterious fire in the sky. It's an unclear, confusing picture in and around Dhahran. Nobody knows, and I want to underline this, nobody knows if Dhahran area has been attacked by Scuds. We are going to work right now this way. We don't know it, so we aren't going to report it. We do know that there's a confusing, tense situation around Dhahran. That's really all we know. Air raid sirens have gone off there, and Scud missiles were reported headed for Dhahran, but this according to Saudi officials. But in the early stages of the war, 24 plus hours ago, there were all kinds of reports of Scud missiles on the way. Most of them proved to be untrue, although the report from the Bahrain officials last evening that some Scud missiles had been fired in that direction but didn't quite get there, that report pretty well checked out. The Allied air offensive continues, relentless air raids against targets inside Iraq and Kuwait, now including B-52 strikes on the elite Iraqi Guard, the, in effect, Praetorian Guard, of which Saddam Hussein has said it's his very best. Now, some of that elite guard is inside Kuwait itself, but a great deal of it had been pulled out of Kuwait and sort of held in the southern part of Iraq. The B-52s made an effort today and tonight to pound, in effect, the daylights out of them. David Martin is at the Pentagon. David?
Dan, Defense Department officials say there is no indication, repeat, no indication that Scud missiles have been launched in the direction of Saudi Arabia. So whatever is happening in Dhahran, the air raid sirens, the strange explosions, the strange lights in the sky, apparently are not related to an actual Scud missile attack. There may have been a false alarm, but right now there is no indication of a Scud missile attack against targets in Saudi Arabia.
For a moment and look at pictures of Israelis on the alert when Israeli radio said that the Scuds were hitting and possible chemical attack. These were some of the scenes. Israel is in the process now of retaliating against the Iraqis. Tom Fenton reported that, as did Jim Jensen earlier. David Martin has confirmed it. Our coverage of the war around the Persian Gulf rolls on. Some of our stations perhaps wanted to break away at that point. Let's pause now and try to give some context and perspective. See the war theater as a whole.
Of course, you can possibly analyze for yourself. He was obviously still very shaken, and they are getting information as it becomes available. He left here at this brief news conference and went back inside, so if there is more information to come, we will be here and can give it to you as it happens. Reporting live from the Israeli mission, Israeli mission in Manhattan, Brenda Blackman, Channel 9 News. Back to you, Robert.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. And we will, of course, stay tuned with you and get further updates as the evening progresses for us. Early?
One of the big concerns that our colleagues in Tel Aviv are having to cope with this situation. We're able to keep our satellite up to talk about this and cover the story. So given past experience, we feel that it's reasonable, Tom, to be here and to be reporting to you from northeastern Saudi Arabia tonight, where people are very much on edge about what this weapon can do.
Well, we never thought we'd see this day where we have to work with the gas masks all the time. This is crazy.
Well,
I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, the point is that if the Iraqis can land a missile in the heart of Tel Aviv with no advanced detection, God only knows what they can do in some of those remote sites in Saudi Arabia or even the Dhahran Air Force Base. Gentlemen, we'll ask you to go about your business of reporting. We want to go to the White House now, where NBC's John Cochran is on duty tonight, and I know that the lights in the West Wing behind you are still burning there, John. That's the office of Brent Scowcroft. Right. What's going on?
Well, that's where most of them are, in Brent Scowcroft's office, which is just, pardon my pointing, but it's right there, that last office on the, we can see the lights toward the edge of the building there. It's a prime territory here at the White House, and in there have been Brent Scowcroft, the President's National Security Advisor, Secretary of State Baker, Deputy Secretary of State Larry Eagleburger, and Marlin Fitzwater, the President's Press Secretary, and a few other aides. Now, Eagleburger's being there is very important because it was Eagleburger who was sent on this mission to Israel last week to try to get the Israelis on board, make sure that they would not respond too quickly and not overreact to any sort of attack from the Iraqis. And I'm sure they're going over in fine detail exactly what Eagleburger was told. They've got a map in there, and they're tracing all of this. And I'm sure President Bush, although he's not in there now, we're not quite sure where he is. He was in the residential part of the White House a little bit earlier. We went back to try to find out exactly what President Bush has said on the record as to what would happen if the Israelis were attacked by the Iraqis. He was asked this on December 18th, almost exactly 1 month ago. The president said at that time, he said, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this, but I have talked to our coalition partners. By that, of course, he meant the Arab partners. He said the coalition will not fall apart if indeed Saddam Hussein attacks Israel. And Israel, what he didn't say, of course, would Israel respond? And of course, that's what we're all waiting to hear, Tom.
All right, John Cochran, we want to go back to Israel now, to NBC's Martin Fletcher, who has been able to remove his gas mask. It's been on again, off again, and then on again, now off again. I think I got the sequence right there. At any rate, he has talked to his family. And Martin, what happened at your home tonight?
Catherine,
Yes.
The pictures that you were seeing right now are some of the first pictures out of Israel. I can't tell you the location of these pictures. What you are seeing now is some folks from a BBC crew putting on their chemical weapon suits. There you see, I believe it's Peter Henderson, cameraman with the BBC, putting on his protective suit, which of course you've already seen being worn by soldiers preparing for such an attack in Saudi Arabia. The crew is getting prepared now to leave, I believe, the hotel to make their way to their office.
Now in the studio, where all the personnel in the studio have they had to put all on. At this stage, everyone's been told to put on their masks. People in the studio that we're in have been told to put on suits if we had our suits available, so we put them on. As you can see here, people are coordinating with other networks around the world. quite frantic at this stage because when we were filming this, nobody was exactly sure about what was going on.
Again, Catherine, we are all doing this for the very first time, of course. We all knew that in order to cover this this very important news event, that we ourselves would have to be protected. There again, you see the people in one of the office buildings, one of the other networks putting on her gas mask, getting prepared, of course, to go out. Again, we can't tell you where this is happening, but we are all getting ourselves protected. Very soon, I believe, you'll start to see some street scenes. Is that correct, Headley?
Yeah, when we left the studio that we're working in, we thought that it was best to roll vision as we drove along. When we were driving along, it was extremely deserted, not a soul around. And it's quite an eerie feeling. I mean, Jerusalem's never like this. You know, this is a city that's been habitated for such a long time, and then it's as if a vapor's gone through here and there's not a soul about.
Behind the person who's talking into the telephone, you can see the windows, of course, that are taped. We were all advised to seal off one room in our house to make sure that it was completely safe against chemical gas. There you see the crew now heading out of the office building, making their way to the parking lot on their way to cover this story.
Headley, I'd like to ask you, this is Larry Register, the Bureau Chief. Yeah. What was that like in that room as you were heading out that door? How did you feel at that moment walking out? Did you feel uncertainty?
Well, actually, it was when we actually decided to make the decision to put our suits on. And we figured, well, we've got the best suits available to us, them being British Army issue suits. And we thought, will we take the chance, will we not? And we figure that, you know, to have pictures like this and let people see them, we believe we had the best available equipment to us, so we thought, well, we'll go and do it. And it was a team decision. The three of us, the crew, we thought we'll stick together and do it.
For our viewers' information, this is Headley Trigg. He's an editor, a sound man with the BBC. Yes, Linda?
These pictures, I believe, were taken just a little over an hour and a half ago, Headley.
Yeah,
you can see the streets of Jerusalem are very, very quiet. Of course, it is the early morning hours, and people were in their homes. At this point, people were being advised to put their gas masks on, to go to their sealed rooms. It is normally a quiet hour in this country, as it is anywhere else in the world, but it is particularly quiet, of course, because the air raid siren had sounded just a little before, and there were people coming around neighborhoods with loudspeakers telling everybody to stay off the streets, to stay in their homes, to put their gas masks on, and to be prepared for a possible chemical gas attack, which, of course, people had been preparing for several days.
You know, if I can interrupt, this is material that I shot, and as Peter was driving along, it was an amazing feeling. There were red lights, traffic lights, and we just thought, what's the point in stopping at a traffic light? We'll be sitting here like sitting ducks. So we just cruised through as if, and not a soul about. And it's like a ghost town at the moment.
Yes.
Can we stand by to cut back to Linda, because we're going to lose picture. So if we can cut back to Linda.
For you, something we reported just a few moments ago, and that is an explosion was heard Friday near the huge airbase at the Saudi city of Bahrain. Apparently there has been at least a single missile attack upon the city of Bahrain. Of course, reporters informed of the imminent attack in the city. We have no further details at this time, and people have been, of course, warned to go to their shelters. Again, a missile attack on Tehran. Apparently one missile has, in fact, landed in that Saudi Arabian city. Now we're going to Larry King and Martin.
Here's the statement, quote, "It is already clear Israel had taken a huge risk upon herself by refraining from a preemptive strike. It is a big risk that no other country, knowing the severity, could have undertaken. We still do not have full information." So clearly a very brief statement, but this is their way of saying, look at what we've done, without knowing, obviously, what they're about to do next or the severity of what they are about to do next. Peter, as I say, we are hoping that he will be joining us a little bit later this evening.
Is there much activity over at the UN tonight?
Absolutely nothing. This place is totally closed up. The Secretary General is gone. We've been told there will be no statement from his office whatsoever this evening. His people have already gone. As a matter of fact, almost everybody was gone from here, and a number of the delegates rushed back when this when the news was made known about the strike on Israel. So totally a closed up place, and it is opening up again.
Okay, Lynn, sure, thank you very much. A little after 9 o'clock Eastern Time, there's not going to be any high-level military briefing from the Pentagon, that is to say from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, until 7 o'clock Eastern Time tomorrow morning. On this first day of the war, the Pentagon said it would brief twice to the American press here. We've had no briefing since 7 o'clock this morning from the Pentagon, though there have been some background information, but most of what we're picking up has been source reporting from the Pentagon and a considerable amount of information from source reporting in eastern Saudi Arabia. On that basis, and including General Cordesman in Boston, the attack on Israel, how would you like to assess the first 26 hours?
This is General Cordesman in Boston.
General Cordesman.
Well,
I beg your pardon. My fault. General
right,
Trainer,
Pete.
I
It's
apologize.
been a very long day for all.
I apologize. I confused everybody there. Go ahead, sir.
I hope that Tony enjoys being his new rank. But at any
I should
rate,
tell people, by the way, you're a former Marine general and also for a long time a military commentator and reporter for the New York Times. Go ahead, sir.
yes. Well, the first 26 hours, of course, started off very euphorically, a term which has been used considerably today, with obviously a very effective initial strike against the Iraqis, which caught them cold. It showed that our electronic wizardry and our cruise missiles and our strike aircraft and smart weapons were as effective as advertised. Unfortunately, I think we were generally misled into thinking that the air offensive capability of the Iraqis had been virtually eliminated, but as we have found out in the last few hours, that was far from true. But nonetheless, the U.S. and the coalition forces literally crippled the offensive operational capability of a good deal of the Iraqi armed forces, and apparently has severely damaged their command, control, and communication system. That we have seriously apparently damaged some of their field forces in southern Iraq and in Kuwait, and presumably are continuing to do that now with additional sorties that apparently range up in the 1,000 factor.
General Trainer, does it make sense to you, because you know something about the Iraqi army, more than most Americans, having covered them fairly extensively, does it make sense to you that Saddam Hussein would hold back his assets like this and then consciously, with a plan in advance, engage Israel the way he has tonight, 26 hours into the campaign?
Well, for him to do that, he has to be able to anticipate the sort of damage that's going to be done to him. Now, I'm not discounting that he, being a very clever fellow, that he hasn't something like that in mind, but he could never know whether any of his equipment was going to survive. And I would suspect that no, he wasn't deliberately holding anything back. I think he was simply, and his forces put into shock by that initial massive attack by the coalition forces.
General Trainer, just one other question. You described Saddam Hussein, as many people have, as a clever man. I think we all know how clever he's been politically, at least in a tactical, if not in a strategic way. How clever a military man is he? I recall hearing stories during the Iraq-Iran war that his generals would on occasion return from the front and tell him to stop meddling in the campaign.
Well, that's in fact the case. He's not a military man, and he doesn't understand military operations. His generals in the early part of the war were basically political hacks, and they failed in their attacks against Iran. And then when the Iranians counterattacked, the Iraqis very nearly lost the war because of the interference by Saddam Hussein, because he didn't trust his military officers. And indeed, they had to appeal to him to stay out of the business of fighting the war, and when he did that, the Iranians were very successful in their defense against the Iranians. But the fact is, he runs the entire country, including the military, so he is the one that's going to set policy, even though he may let his military officers carry out their operations within the parameters of that policy.
Okay, General Trainer, thank you. One of those military operations tonight appears to have been, doesn't appear to have been, a missile attack on the Mediterranean coast of Israel with 8 to 10 missiles.
Operating. We have reported incorrectly that a missile had landed in this vicinity. In fact, I am advised by both Saudi and U.S. military officials who are surrounding me at the moment that there was no incoming missile, that the explosions that we heard were in fact noise from air defense systems, that there were air defense missiles of one kind or another that had been launched. That was with the noise that was heard. There was great concern and fear that there had been some kind of surface-to-surface missile that had landed in our area. That is not the fact. And I just wanted to make sure, and the folks that are both officials from both the U.S. and Saudi government want to make sure that people understand that there has not been an attack in our region.
Terry, there apparently also was a conflicting report that possibly an incoming Scud had been intercepted by a Patriot missile. Could that have been the case?
That apparently was not the case. There apparently was no missile launched here, and there was no missile intercepted. Based on the information that we have from U.S. And Saudi military officials both, there have been no missile launches into Saudi Arabia tonight. There have been, as you know, launches into Israel. The first time that the reports came in of the missiles being launched into Israel, the sirens sounded, the alarm sounded, and we were all rushed here to the basement, to the bomb shelter, for fear that there might also be missiles.
Which hit very close to the these houses. You can see the crater over there where I'm pointing out. And I presume that about a few people were wounded. Tonight, for what I know, is only one.
No, we think it's 3.
3? I don't know. I know, according to the information that I have, it's only one.
And it was conventional?
It was a conventional with explosives, not with gas. No, I don't know. In Givat time also they have another one? I see. Yeah, yeah.
In the last 2 days, what is your feeling right now?
My feeling is, look, I mean, war is not a summer camp. And to my sorrow, people were wounded. We are taking care of the families, of the babies, of the children. I went to, because the people are now they were concentrated in 2 shelters, in a school and in another place. I went to calm them down, to speak with them, to tell them that we will take care of them. We'll evacuate them from here, we'll give them housing, and we will continue to live and to enjoy life. Okay, thanks a lot.
That was the mayor of Tel Aviv. These are the first pictures, and the mayor of Tel Aviv making this quick tour of the neighborhood where he says this particular Scud missile did have a conventional warhead. General Chris, did you have something to add here?
There are a couple of things. One, I think the casualties are low because apparently the people are in the shelters from that warning. The other thing, it's pretty good damage. We assume this is a 1,000-pound warhead. One of Saddam's surprises might be that he's got a bigger warhead on his missile than we're estimating.
So far as we know, none of the 8 to 10 Scuds total that hit all over Israel tonight had chemical warheads. We're still checking on that. Our CBS News coverage of the war around the Persian Gulf continues as we look at these pictures of the damage in Israel from the Scuds.
Dan.
A total all over Israel of 8 to 10. 3 to 5 of the missiles hit in the Tel Aviv area. Here's the crater caused by the conventional warhead on this particular Scud. The Scuds can be equipped with a lot of different warheads. General George Chris just pointing out to us here in the studio that from the look of this damage, part of Saddam Hussein's message may be that he has a somewhat larger conventional warhead on these Scud missiles than was otherwise widely believed. And if the Iraqis go after Saudi Arabia, in Saudi Arabia, the Saudis have Chinese ballistic missile with a megaton warhead to fire back. Now, all of that we were told by Leslie Stahl at the White House not long ago as we continue to look at this damage in Tel Aviv caused by the Scuds, that some Scud missiles had been fired at Saudi Arabia. The U.S. Defense Department had confirmed that. Where they were fired and where they hit and what damage they did in Saudi Arabia remains unclear at this hour. Now, as we continue to look at these photographs, first pictures in from Israel of the damage there tonight, keep in mind that the casualty total is said to be very low. The first reports are not even many people were wounded by this. You may want to note that the sirens had sounded in Tel Aviv before the Scuds went off, and that may account for the what is now an amazingly low casualty figure. when you look at how much damage was wrought by this one single Scud hit in this particular Tel Aviv's neighborhood. In other late Gulf War headlines tonight, a confirmed 7 Iraqi Scud missiles hit Israel, possibly as many as 10. Israel denies that retaliation is actually in progress at the moment, described as, quote, outraged. Allied warplanes continue to hit Iraqi positions inside Kuwait and inside Iraq. That includes B-52 strikes. A late announcement from the Pentagon confirming that Iraqi Scud missiles have been fired into both Israel and Saudi Arabia. Now, practically nothing is known about the Scud missiles fired into Saudi Arabia. General Chris was just noting for us that the Saudis have some Chinese missiles with which they could retaliate if they chose to do so. The White House says now that President Bush is, quote, outraged. President Bush is known to have met tonight, I shouldn't say no, reported to have met tonight with Secretary of State Baker and has been in touch with the Israeli representatives in Washington and also representatives of some of the Arab allies, including the Egyptians. No confirmation that the missile or missiles fired into Saudi Arabia even hit anything. We're continuing to check. All the Defense Department has said is that, yes, some Scuds were fired at Saudi Arabia tonight. This is in addition and separate apart from the Scuds that hit Israel. We do know what happened to the missiles aimed at Israel. At least we know a few things. Israeli radio says 7 people were what it describes as slightly hurt in tonight's missile attacks, which dramatically alter the boundaries of this Gulf War. Saddam Hussein had threatened to hit Israel, said he would hit Israel immediately if the United States attacked him. He made good on that threat tonight. It is not absolutely confirmed if any of the warheads on the Scuds that hit Israel were chemical or biological or nerve gas. This particular strike in this particular Tel Aviv neighborhood, clearly and according to the Tel Aviv mayor, had a conventional weapons charge on it, but one larger than most military experts would have.
Missiles were launched from Iraq against Israel. Some of them hit the areas of Tel Aviv and Haifa. It just shows what kind of risk Israel took upon itself when it refrained from preemptive strike.
In the air war over Iraq and Kuwait, the British report the loss of a second Tornado warplane in the offensive. That would raise to the confirmed total of 4 Allied warplanes lost so far. Those are officially acknowledged as lost. That includes 1 U.S. warplane, an F-18 Hornet. U.S. warplanes were busy all through the night and day launching more attacks from Saudi Arabia. One American aviator talked of his experiences over Baghdad and of his encounter with Iraqi warplanes.
We didn't, obviously we couldn't see if they were coming close, so discretion being the better part of valor, we decided that we would leave the target area before we took one up the tail.
Iraq now claims that 60 Allied planes total have been destroyed. The Allies say that it's 4 planes total lost so far. There are suggestions from the Allied side that the Iraqis are trying to count in some Tomahawk missiles that they may have brought down. Those are guided missiles that did not contain any pilots. Let's go back now to Tom Fenton in Tel Aviv for an update on what's happening in the wake of the Iraqi Scud missile attacks on Israel. Tom?
Well, we've got some more reports, Dan, from one report from one of our own cameramen who visited 2 of the sites in Tel Aviv. The first one in Holon, he said that was an industrial area. It set off a fairly large fire, and that was clearly a conventional warhead. The second one...
That is in the western sector of Baghdad. That is a water tower not very far from the Al Rashid Hotel from where these pictures were taken. You know why American pilots earlier today described as an anti-aircraft facility on top of one of the buildings in the western part of Baghdad. All of these shot from the Al Rashid Hotel. The beginnings of panic in the street by some people, though others soldier walking around. Remember now that what we know is that cruise missiles, in part, were the first things launched against the power grid on the edges of Baghdad. Baghdad is also ringed by anti-aircraft facilities. You can see them going all off at once. There are SAM sites on the western side of the city. These are shot with a night scope by the ITN, the Independent Television News cameraman with whom we work in Baghdad.
The Iraqi defenses were spectacular in their
Here's a commentary.
But where was Iraq's iron fist, its air force, and much boasted defense plan? To all intents and purposes, it was non-existent in this crucial phase of the war. Minutes after Baghdad erupted into battle, the Iraqi authorities ordered all the journalists they could find to stay in a deep bomb shelter.
Terry Cheney and Baker's Deputy Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger. Eagleburger, you recall, was in Israel last weekend to go over with Israeli officials the battle plan, if you will, what their stakes are, what our stakes are. There's speculation here that perhaps this whole question of retaliation was discussed, and perhaps they're trying to keep Israel at bay while our plan, that is the U.S. Desert Storm plan, continues in its phase. It seems to, the thinking here seems to be that the trigger wire, if you will, hasn't been tripped to force the Israeli retaliation, that what's going on now is that American forces are continuing their Desert Storm phase. The president spent the evening in the residence. He was informed of the attack by security advisor Scowcroft. He also had meetings with Baker and Cheney about that. The statement says the president is outraged at and condemns this further aggression by Iraq. But again, the two key ingredients, damage assessments are being made, so no confirmation about the use of chemical weapons, and it says coalition forces are on the attack. No mention of an Israeli retaliation. If the Israelis do retaliate, as I said before, it escalates this to a whole different plane. It makes the situation far more grave. Those are the sentiments of Florida Republican Senator Connie Mack. We spoke to Senator Mack a few moments ago. Here's some of what he had to say.
I am outraged over Saddam Hussein's unprovoked attacks against Israel. This is a clear sign of desperation. I am confident our international coalition against Saddam Hussein will hold together.
Those sentiments are also shared by President Bush. As recently as a month ago, the president was asked about the possibility of an attack on Israel and what that would do to the pan-Arab coalition. The president said almost a month to the day that he felt the coalition would stick together in the event of an attack on Israel. But to recap, Rick, what we've got from the Department of Defense and from the White House is that missiles have fallen in Israel and Saudi Arabia, but still no confirmation as to whether chemical weapons were used or what type of weapons, be they conventional or some other type of weapon, and whether or not Israel has retaliated. We do have one other piece of information to pass along to you. Israeli officials here in Washington at the embassy are expecting to be briefing reporters about the situation in just a couple of minutes from now, and we have crews on the scene.
Tom, is it not possible that Senator Mack and some of the others are overstating the situation? Basically, they're almost intimating that the coalition would fall apart when, in fact, some of the countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia, perhaps even Jordan, would certainly understand a quick and almost efficient retaliation by Israel.
Rick, I think what's happening here, and I don't mean to speak for the senator, but I think what's happening is he's responding to all of the confusing reports. The scene at the White House tonight was one of very deliberate speed. We could not get a hold of any spokespeople for the entire evening until just a few moments before this broadcast. That's because they were locked up trying to define exactly what happened and trying to carefully define exactly what they were going to say, not to sway this thing one way or the other, to be precise in the extent of damage, the type of force being used, that sort of thing. I think, and this is my personal opinion, I think Senator Mack is responding to all of the confusion of the events that we've heard over the last few hours, and perhaps nothing more than that.
But again, you have not confirmed, nor has anybody else for this matter, whether in fact right now Israel is in a retaliatory state.
That's correct. The White House is not offering us any kind of confirmation as to whether Israel has in fact retaliated.
Okay, that's Tom Cole reporting to us from our nation's capital. He is outside the White House. I'm going to throw things over to Sally. In the meantime, I'm going to be heading over to our map to show you some special designs that we have made to help you better understand the situations that have been going on tonight. Sally?
As you know, if you have been watching, we have had news bulletins earlier tonight that Dhahran, Saudi Arabia was under some kind of attack. And Tom Cole just mentioned that the Pentagon has confirmed that a missile did hit Saudi Arabia. Dhahran would have been a likely target, we're told. An American Army military base is there. That's where many of our live reports are coming from from Saudi Arabia tonight that you've been watching. We've been watching live pictures from Dhahran for the last hour or so, and we have seen no sign of an attack, just air raid sirens. At last word, crews there reported that at least one missile was indeed launched on Dhahran, but that an experimental new anti-missile defense system there worked and stopped whatever was heading their way. But they apparently don't feel they are out of danger yet, because we have Charles Ziwi, who we were going to have a live report from him here, but he is in a bunker, a bomb shelter, under protection right now, worried about what could happen. So we will hold off on going to him, and when things clear up there, maybe we can get a live report within this hour. Well, right now we want to add a little perspective to this story. We're going to talk next with a Miami Beach rabbi who returned from Israel early today. Our Team 7 coverage continues now with Channel 7's Brooke Bradley, who joins us live from the home of Rabbi Gary Glick.
Because much of it was small guns and smallish arms fire. And we were told earlier by Air Force officials that many of the U.S. planes simply flew over that curtain of lead, and they were able to do so with impunity because there was simply no resistance from any Iraqi aircraft. As to other more sophisticated fire, well, that was taken out, as you mentioned, by cruise missiles and also by these F-4 weasels that suppressed all kinds of enemy air defenses, and by other aircraft that jammed their early warning devices.
Okay, I don't think the General Trainer or Tony
were reacting.
Good morning. It took us something like 30 minutes to drive in a very deserted town in order to try to find the location where it was hit. And when we found the place, it was quite a strong picture. I had in mind the pictures that I saw on television from Beirut, or what I saw myself in Beirut at the time. A lot of destruction, and very few people around, only the security people and fire brigade. And the destruction was very, very strong on something like 100-meter circle.
Now, what neighborhood was this, and what was damaged?
The damage was the houses. Some houses collapsed, and a lot of
blast damage?
Blast damage as well, yes.
What about casualties?
Casualties, we heard that there were few, very few, and slightly damaged, wounded. And this was in Hatikva neighborhood, where normally we used to eat very good in very good restaurants normally.
There's a very good Yemeni restaurant there, right. Now, this was a conventional warhead?
This was a conventional
sound on this. Silent pictures. Aircraft strikes, anti-aircraft fire into the night sky. Not since World War II have scenes of an air attack on a modern 20th century city and scenes such as this. Now here's some sound.
Guidance systems of planes and missiles sent their payloads to Saddam Hussein's front door.
This is right along the Tigris River near the hotel section and near the presidential palace.
Those who were caught out in it
ITN reporter narrates.
At the time of this report, I do not know the extent of Iraqi casualties. The bombs and missiles targeted Saddam Hussein's palace, his communications centers, his warfare production plants, and his missile bases. They were destroyed by high-tech weapons in a theater of war hitherto unwitnessed. Impossible to pick out all the weaponry, but I saw cruise missiles skidding across the skyline to their pre-programmed targets. The Iraqi defenses were spectacular in their intensity. But where was Iraq's iron fist, its air force, and much boasted defense plan? To all intents and purposes, it was non-existent in this crucial phase of the war. Minutes after Baghdad erupted into battle, the Iraqi authorities ordered all the journalists they could find.
Re-rack it. We're going to try to re-rack that footage. The most dramatic photographs of the war so far coming through tonight. One, that mother with her children, including a small baby in Israel, trying desperately to get the gas mask on them and to cover the baby with the chemical weapons precautionary material in the cradle. And now these pictures of the bombs bursting in air and the rockets' red glare over Baghdad last night as a U.S.-led air armada poured it on Baghdad.
Of lethal force. It was terrifying to watch an attack on this scale and so close. Iraqi anti-aircraft gunners probed the sky with trails of tracer bullets, but no attacking aircraft were visible to the naked eye.
This gives you some idea. It's one thing to talk about what the scene was. It's another to see it. It gives you some idea of the kind of courage it takes to fly into this kind of defense and what it must be like on the ground when this kind of air battle, so far as we can see, mostly ground to air and way of defense, erupts over a large city such as Baghdad.
But at the time of this report, I do not know.
People run for cover in the darkness.
The bombs and missiles.
And the sky lit up like, apparently for hours this way last night over Baghdad.
By high-tech weapons.
These pictures were taken from high above a hotel. I can tell where the location is here roughly. One of the three major hotels, probably the Rashid. You can see glimpses of the river, the presidential palace in the distance there, and up the road a bit, I don't think we see it, the Iraqi Defense Ministry.
Its Air Force, a much boasted defense plan. To all intents and purposes.
Much of this so-called AAA fire, anti-aircraft artillery, and then the scenes of the Iraqis taking cover. Baghdad last night under air attack. David Martin is at the Pentagon with an update about the Scud missiles launched at Saudi Arabia. David?
Dan, the Pentagon now confirms that a Patriot anti-aircraft missile based in Saudi Arabia shot down one Iraqi Scud missile fired from Iraq into Saudi Arabia. I think we actually saw that happen on a videotape that was running when Bob Simon was talking to us from Dhahran. We saw a missile go up in the air and then explode. At the time, we didn't have an explanation for exactly what had happened. I think that's what we were witnessing. More on the Scud launchers. We believe that these launchers, that the launches both against Saudi Arabia and in Israel came from mobile Scud missile launchers that escaped the first waves of the American air attack. And congressional sources have said that this afternoon, when Defense Secretary Cheney and General Colin Powell, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, went up to Capitol Hill to brief them on the progress of the air war, they told the members of Congress that 15 to 20 mobile Scud launchers had escaped the initial air assault. So that would be 15 to 20 Scud launchers on the loose, and that would apparently be what is causing these Scud attacks both on Israel and Saudi Arabia. During these same briefings, Cheney and Powell also reportedly assured the members of Congress that there would be no frontal assault on Kuwait. But, and then they said, we have other plans. However, I think you have to be cautious about what that means, because in military terminology, a frontal assault may mean something different than it means to the average person. I think when they are ruling out a frontal assault, they are ruling out basically a World War I human wave assault on the Iraqi trenches. I don't think they are ruling out an attempt to punch through Iraqi lines at their weakest point. However, the report from congressional sources is that they have other plans than a frontal assault. One more thing on this question of whether or not Israel is retaliating against Iraq. The information that made U.S. officials think that that Israel might be retaliating came from the U.S. Central Command in Saudi Arabia, and it was based on radar contacts which showed Israeli planes heading in the direction of Iraq. Now, I do not have an update on what became of those Israeli planes on the radar scopes, but that was the source of the information that Israel might be retaliating against Iraq.
I want to follow up with you, David Martin, but quickly, we're going to try to play the videotape. We didn't know what was happening. This is videotape of a U.S. Patriot ground-to-air missile knocking down a Scud missile tonight in Saudi Arabia. Boombo. The Patriot missiles are around the air base in Dhahran. Our most recent visit there, they had reinforced the Patriots. You could see them. The place bristled with these Patriot missiles. And I remember very well a U.S. Army corporal, when I said, can you hit anything with that? He riveted his eyes right on mine. He says, you go back home and tell him, Mr. Rather, if anything Saddam's got comes this way, we'll knock it out. Now, I don't know whether it was that corporal that did it, but you could see on the videotape that's what happened. So, Bob Simon in Saudi Arabia, something did happen around the air base tonight after all.
Something did happen, Dan, and as hesitant as I am to strike an ominous note, we've been reporting for days now that intelligence sources in the region have believed for some time that Saddam Hussein's three objectives were to hit Israel, to hit Saudi oil installations, and to cause American casualties. Well, he has now succeeded in two of those objectives. He has launched Scuds to Israel. He has hit a Saudi oil installation. Let us hope and pray that he misses on the third. I think that the Scud missiles, those launched to Israel and those that were knocked down by Patriots here, in any case which did not land any place that we've heard about, have been of very little military significance. It appears from what we know right now that they did not succeed in sucking Israel into the war, which was certainly their prime objective. If they succeeded in anything, Dan, it was in puncturing the euphoria that has been rampant around here for the last half a day. And in some respects, that might not be entirely a bad thing. Dan?
Yeah. Indeed, Bob. And Secretary of Defense Cheney, General Colin Powell were saying earlier today that this is very serious business, and in their words, it may go on for some time. Now, stick here with us. Our continuous coverage will roll on. We're going to bring in General George Christ to talk about when David Martin said there's no thought of a frontal ground assault to retake Kuwait. We'll talk with General Christ about what some of the possibilities are. But in the seconds we have left for this section, Ed Bradley, it practically, I'm not afraid to say, takes my breath away. This thing reads like a bad war novel, but it's not a novel. It's not a movie. We see it happening. The Patriot knocks a Scud out of the sky. Scuds hit Israel in the scene of that air battle over Baghdad, never to be forgotten.
All right, and I think as chilling as watching the war footage was watching the civilians in Tel Aviv, in an apartment, with a mother putting gas mask on her young children, and with the baby you saw in a bassinet in a crib already covered with the protective plastic to keep any chemical or nerve gas away from them. I think that's the thing that we forget in this country, what war is really like, because it's something we don't experience here. We're used to seeing what happens with our soldiers in battle, but we don't see too often what happens with civilians, even when they're not in battle, just in preparation for it and the kind of uncertainty and the fear that they have to live with on a day-to-day basis. It's chilling.
The only thing I can recall in my memory, back in World War II in the early stages in the Battle of Britain, the air raid siren, the people going underground, these are those pictures that we mentioned earlier of the mother putting the gas mask on her small children in Tel Aviv. This was Tel Aviv earlier this evening as these sirens sounded and Israeli radio warned everyone that Scud missiles apparently on the way. Off to the right here in this frame is special chemical gear over the cradle where there's a baby. We're going to talk strategy and what the building possibility of a ground war may entail in a moment. But for the moment, these are the headlines from the expanding Gulf War this evening. Israel is hit by a confirmed 7, possibly as many as 10 Iraqi Scud missiles. Casualties are reported to be light, but that's unconfirmed. The White House says missiles also were fired at Saudi Arabia. We saw on videotape a Patriot missile knocking one of those Scuds out of the sky. President Bush condemns the attacks he's described as being, quote, outraged. Israel denies that retaliation is actually happening. However, the Israelis say they do reserve the right to strike back at the Iraqis. Dramatic new pictures tonight of last night's American raid on Baghdad and the Iraqi effort to beat back the U.S. air attack.
The illuminated sky was filled with a star-spangled display of lethal force.
star-spangled display of lethal force over Baghdad. These pictures, Baghdad City last night. This night, the focus is on Iraqi retaliation. Saddam Hussein made good on his threat to lob missiles into Israel. Scud missiles fired into Israel and into Saudi Arabia. One of those in Saudi Arabia was knocked out of the sky by the Patriot anti-Scud missile defense. The Patriot designed to knock down warplanes, but it also can knock down missiles. Now, as his top aides huddled in the White House this evening, President Bush said that Iraq's missile attacks, quote, outraged him. The president's spokesman said Allied warplanes are even now hitting missile sites inside Iraq. Let's go to Washington live. Statement from the Israeli ambassador to the United States.
There has been an unprovoked attack by Iraq, launching Scud missiles, or perhaps improved Scud missiles, at purely civilian targets in Israel. Jeopardizing the lives of both Jews and Arabs, Israelis and Palestinians, who live next to each other, are often intermingled, and in a situation where Israel has time and time again declared that it is not part of the conflict with Iraq, it is not part of the coalition, and as a matter of fact, it has remained with a low profile, if you remember that term, for all these months since the beginning of the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. We don't have exact details as of yet. We understand that there's a possibility that more than 10 missiles were actually launched at Israel. Probably 2 hit the Tel Aviv area, and another one hit the Haifa area. There may have been another hit, but that is not clear as of yet. The missiles in the Tel Aviv area hit a neighborhood in the southern part of the city, inhabited mostly by elderly people and laborers, people who toil for their livelihood. We have so far, and we hope this is a final count, received information that there have been 6 or 7 injured, fortunately not seriously injured, but I don't know the exact details. And there has been considerable damage in property, among other things, because that area where the missiles hit does not usually contain the best of housing, and therefore these houses were probably damaged more than perhaps other houses would have been. Immediately after the information about the missile strike became known, I was in contact with the Secretary of State and the Deputy Secretary of State and with the White House, all of whom conveyed their sympathy in the strongest possible feeling, in the strongest possible language. The word mentioned was devastated. And I must say, listening to their voices, they were indeed. And I was asked to convey this message, as well as others, to my government, to my Prime Minister, which, of course, I promptly did. I know that the two governments, or their representatives, have been in contact and are in contact since then. I would like to add only two further comments. Number one, that the government of Israel, and let me add, fully supported by the opposition in Israel, has declared that, of course, Israel reserves the right to respond in any way it would deem fit, without going at the present time into particulars what the decision of the Israeli government in that respect will be. My final comment is that Israel took a very tough decision, knowingly, to risk a first strike on it. We knew that we might be hit. I myself was often asked on TV, do we take these threats seriously? I did say, we all did. We take these threats very, very seriously. There's no